So if the fundamental innate mind of clear light were empty of itself, it wouldn't exist. So in Gelug, self-emptiness means that the fundamental innate mind of clear light, for instance, is empty of its own inherent existence. It's other empty in the sense that it is empty of the three subtle minds, the moon, sun, and darkness, or the mind of vivid white appearance, the mind of red or orange. What? Fill it in. Increase of appearance, and the mind of black near attainment. Why is it called near attainment? Is right ahead of it. Yeah, near the attainment of clear light. So that's within Gelug. That's how we can have the two types of good self-emptiness. We can have the two types of emptiness, self-emptiness and other emptiness. Okay. Now, I don't know His Holiness's reference to the good and bad emptiness within Nyingma. And I know within Jonang, they joke about Gelugpas as if to say they are scared silly of self-emptiness and always want it to be an emptiness of inherent existence. And they don't want us to hear that things are empty of themselves. They are scared silly of that. That's my own colorful translation of their reaction to Gelugpa's a hearing about the Jonangpa doctrine of self-emptiness. So the three types of space, that's where we are. Our external space, which is the sky in a vast view. Now, I brought this up last time as a sky looking down, really. But this is sky that could be down, which, interestingly enough, with the first meditator that the Harvard group tested above Dharamsala, that's what caught my eye, really. It was both down and out, but it could also be up. When I started doing sky meditation in Canada, when I hiked up, as I've told you, which was pretty much, it wasn't a cliff, but for me it was like hiking up a cliff, a very sharp incline, and when I got up to the top it was flat. And so I would lie on the ground and stare upwards. So that's another vast sky, vast view. And stare into the sky. And that's where my sky meditation began. In the summer of my it didn't begin there, sorry. But anyway, in the summer of my junior year. It began on the freighter between the Panama Canal and Tahiti, which was after my first year, after I left college in my first year. And before that, it began in my cabin, outside my cabin, overlooking Shadow Lake in Concord, Vermont. Most people don't know, have never heard of Concord, Vermont. Looking down over Shadow Lake and out over to New Hampshire. It was a vast, vast view. And eventually, getting this vast view into my mind, you see, it opens up the potentialities of the mind, which in Nyingma has to do with the opening up of the capacity of appearances in the practice of leap over, which eventually we'll get to this very nice condensation of his teachings, which I put together, and which quite some time ago I said I would share with you, and which led to my looking down on Shadow Lake one day, and the lake turned purple to my eye, so to speak, and a large throne appeared, and God appeared on the throne, headless. I think that was the last time I saw God. This was in would be the fall of 1959. And then, so you see, I'm reeling back when my sky meditations began. So, internal space. And the question was brought up last time. I'll put it in my own words. What the hell is internal space, which is our usual empty mind? Well, that that doesn't mean that our mind is usually empty. It just means that at those moments when, it has to mean, when our mind is usually, when it so happens that the mind empties out, you know, there's these moments of clarity, and you have a sense of internal space, you know, mind empties out. You know, mind is not always cluttered. Occasionally you have a sense of space, of internal sky, or so that's all it could refer to. This is, I don't recall Khetsun Sangpo's explaining this, but I think that's all this could mean. And secret space. So, Chi Nang Sangwa. This is a typical way of talking about the, well, to use the word usual. External is the most usual. Internal is, you know, you have usual, less usual, and deeper. So 3 stages of getting more profound. Secret space, which is, of course, empty intrinsic awareness. If we think back of where we are in this discussion, we're in a section on not the path of release, but the path of method. And it's notable how easily the text glides from the path of release to the path of method. How easy, I referred to it as lovingly. He didn't say, but in the cruddy path of method, but that those other simple-minded asses believe in. He glided into this topic that obviously is very important, and launches into a discussion of a profound type of meditation that is used and that involves empty intrinsic awareness in its practice. And in the process of discussing it, he is discussing how one moves from superficial understandings to deep realization. Right? That's how the discussion is moving. And the metaphor that he uses is the moon. And, what is it, a painting of the moon, and a reflection of the moon, seeing a painting of the moon, and seeing a reflection of the moon, and finally we're going to get down to seeing the moon itself, which actually isn't the finality. That's going to be the metaphoric mind of clear light, and then there's going to be the actual clear light that's beyond that. So Khetsun says you go to an isolated place. Well, how isolated does it have to be? I mean, it has to be someplace that's quiet. Well, for me, in my first place in Vancouver, it was the backside of my apartment, which was quiet. And there I looked down. And because I have a fear of heights, but I'm okay if there's glass, although I could play with the glass, leaning into it more. But, I could get I could have a sense of the vastness of the downward view there. I could also, from the other side, see over to Mount Baker. But, such as the high mountain, gaze at external space. So it tells you what external space is in a cloudless sky. Or you could look from top of building, but preferably away from anybody else. On a high mountain, stare at the sky, which is exactly what I did. Now, I wasn't mixing external, internal, and secret space, although I imagined that by staring at external space, internal space got mixed with it. But secret space, I can't claim anything. I was a beginner. But also out on the Pacific Ocean, up at the smokestack on the windward side. There was nothing but sky. Windward side. Otherwise, I'd be seeing smoke. So, for the secret space to be there, you would already have been introduced to and identified intrinsic awareness. Or you would have had, so that would take the path of release, or in the path of method, you would have had some experience, right? We're talking about path of method, of the dissolution of the coarse levels of consciousness. Now that doesn't mean that you reach the path of seeing, because there are, right? He's already been talking about coarser versions of the dissolutions. And you want to keep as long as you can without any conceptuality interfering. So you need to, right, there are three types of number one, recognizing, oh, a thought has arisen. That's the first type. The second, when you get used to that, then it can more automatically function, and it can disappear like a snake unraveling itself. You know, a snake that's been tied into a knot. It's not that you tie it into a knot, deliberately tie it, but it, like a snake that's already been tied into a knot, it can untie itself. Because you've gotten so used to this process of noticing thoughts and not getting hauled away by them. And the third type is like a thought has come into your mind, but it doesn't find anything there that wants to get a hold of it. There's nothing in the house to rob. The robber comes into an empty house and there's nothing to rob. I just thought of a counterexample. The mind is so terrible about coming up with stupid counterexamples. Betsy's car was robbed broken into by, it has to be boys who, wanted to rob some stuff. So there was nothing to rob. She always say, a crappy old Honda, and she didn't leave anything in it. So they took it for a month and trashed it. Trashed the insides. So you see, that was the dirty old man's, dirty old man, me, coming up with a counterexample. There was nothing to rob, so they trashed it. You see, the example is of a house that's got nothing to rob in it, so I came up with a counterexample. So they trashed the house. They broke the windows, and there was nothing to take. So they trashed it, and they ruined the walls. Often in these texts, there are examples, and there's somebody in the room who then takes the example and trashes the example. Won't take the example for what it's worth. That means all of us. So I called myself the dirty old man who won't take the example for what it's worth. All right. So in other words, comes into the empty house and leaves. So then you could say leaves and goes somewhere else? No. Leaves means falls apart, gives up, self-disintegrates. So it's called rang shar, rang trill. It self-dawns, so follow my hand, the conception dawns, rang means the conception, dawns, and rang, so dawns, trill, releases. This is as if my fingers dissolved right in front of you. Dawns. Dawns, trill, releases, disappears, in other words. The conception is there, and disappears, releases. Trill there means disappears. So in other words, something appears to your mind when you meditate, and it dissolves right in front of you, and you continue meditating on what you want to meditate on, instead of grabbing a hold of your face and pulling you into that topic. Oh, I want to think about that. Oh, I can make some money by doing that. Money being, I can advance, blah, blah. I can get back at that person. I can get closer to that person and get some sex. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't have said that to you. Sorry. I can get some smile. I can finally get through to that person. I can break down that person's resistance. Even virtuous things, I can help that person, right? I can help smooth out that person's problem. Those virtuous things are problems at that point. I can help the monasteries, blah, blah. I'll give you a good one. I can help Jeffrey get some more money so that, now this is something you should think about. Let it interfere with your meditation. Jeffrey wants to get some $1,000 contributions or $5,000 contributions. That's what they taught us in Taiwan. You need however many 1,000 contributions or 5,000. That's all you need. It's not too many. You can think about that. Don't let those disappear. Those have to disappear. The virtuous ones are problems at that time. And those, of course, are very virtuous. So, they have to, that's there, and it has to disappear like that, without this even being there, right? Totally. So, without any conceptuality interfering, when you can sustain the continuum, right? That's the second key. Sustain the continuum of this meditation for a period of time. With the three types of space mixed as one taste. So the three It's not like you got three types of space, 1, 2, 3, but because there's something somewhat similar in external space, in internal space, in secret space. There's something similar in a vivid vacuity, and your mind is dissolved into it. Then you'll even think your body doesn't exist. Because the mind is totally focused into that. So, your senses aren't paying attention to your body. Everything having turned into space. People say, that person's meditating a lot, it's become really spacey. And then, if you do get overwhelmed with, if conceptuality arises, that means if you can't handle it, then you might do the pot-like breath meditation, or do something to get over the unfavorable winds. This is like the physical exercises in the 6 yogas of Naropa. Would have been great to have a video when His Holiness taught these. And then go back to your threefold space meditation. The conceptuality has to be handled. And then he says, if you don't have the path of release, if you have not been introduced to an identified intrinsic awareness, you see how he's blending path of release and path of method, then whatever practice of emptiness you have, do that. Use that with this threefold space. Do that. Do that practice. And you'll gain, in the next paragraph, you'll gain a lot of practice. More than you might gain over months and years. It's cool, isn't it? It gives you a taste of. So you get a visionary experience like space. So what I did when I came back in my senior year in college, and I maintained the practice on the banks of the Charles in Cambridge, and actually, and then turned my dorm room into a dark retreat without ever having heard about a dark retreat. Totally dark. No light at all. And stared into darkness until all sorts of things happened in the darkness. Anyway, these I'm not saying what I went through was the dissolution, was this level of dissolution even, but was probably somewhere in the first four rather than the last four. But anyway, what he's talking about here are the experience of the dissolutions that are described in the last four. So Mipam Gyatsho says these are mere what I'm talking about in terms of what was going on while I was in college, not later. These are similarities with the clear light, but are not the realizational actual clear light. They're visionary experiences. However we want to translate nyam. Dawnings to the mind of aspects partially similar to the clear light that is the mode of abiding. Now, in Gelug, the mode of abiding would be emptiness. But in Nyingma, as we know, the mode of abiding is both emptiness and yeshe. What's my word for yeshe? I'm running out of words.
Pristine wisdom.
Pristine wisdom. They are also called metaphoric or example clear light. The example, what is an example of the clear light, which is the exemplified clear light. The example exemplifies the meaning. It could be translated as the meaning clear light. The actual clear light. The exemplified clear light. So Sangpo goes on to say it's like the smoke that emerges when sticks get hotter and hotter, but fire is not yet visible. Well, I mean, if you experienced the metaphoric clear light, you would think you were totally enlightened. Never mind, it's not smoky, but as to give you an idea of what, when smoke is there, you know that there's fire there. You can draw some conclusion. So, down in the middle of that, but here the term refers to spiritual experience. You have many fantastic, listen to him. He's talking from experience. You have many fantastic visionary experiences, the dawning of which you never experienced before. These are not just wild visions, but of course, not just that. And it's interesting how he brings it down to earth. This is like training for a profession. As you get close to graduating from school, sounds a bit dangerous, doesn't it? It's like you go to police academy and you think you're a police person. So you start going out and arresting people. You shoot somebody. You think you're it. So you start, you would think you could get carried away with yourself, right? He doesn't quite say that. And then at the very end he said, they are signs of the body of attributes. And it's a very telling meaning, a very telling explanation of effulgence. They are signs of the body of attributes, since they are its effulgence. So it tells you what effulgence means, gives you some idea. They cannot be considered entities separate from pristine wisdom, even if they are not pristine wisdom itself. Pristine wisdom is not called visionary experience, the entity. It is called actual. Another term here can mean the meaning clear light, the thing that's exemplified. Oh my. The combination of his explanation and of Khetsun Sangpo's explanation and Mipam Gyatsho's exposition is really amazing, isn't it? And then let's finish with this final paragraph from Mipam Gyatsho. Therefore, all meditations on clear light or emptiness by regular mentality in the manner of apprehended object and apprehending subject are like a moon in a painting. Now, actually, it's, I believe, in the next sentence. That's quite like how His Holiness describes initial meditation on emptiness, where he says, you search for the object, you search, for instance, for your body, and you search among the bases of designation. And he says, make sure to think when you don't find it, I haven't found it. It doesn't exist. Make sure to think it doesn't exist. And so he specifies that you're to think in the manner of apprehended object and apprehending subject. It doesn't exist. That body, which covers its basis of designation, its basis of imputation, doesn't exist. And therefore, some people think, oh, that's Gelug meditation on emptiness. Well, yes, it is preliminary meditation. In other words, what His Holiness is saying is when you search and don't find, don't space out. Take the meditation, take the medicine. When you don't find it, make sure you think, oh, that one doesn't exist. Make sure you think it out. That one that I was looking for doesn't exist. But you need, but I will add, don't be a jerk and think that's all meditation on emptiness is in Gelug. That's the first step. Realize that you're meditating on an absence and get used to that absence and take the medicine that you haven't found that thing that you were looking for, and keep that in mind and concentrate on it. Don't lose it, because otherwise you'll think that losing it is emptiness. Going blank is emptiness. And then you see, as you concentrate on that absence, taking that medicine, there are all sorts of stages in which the consciousness blends with the absence. And then apprehended object, apprehending subject, this sense disappears. And of course you have to have the mind of calm abiding. And when you attain the meditative stabilization, which is the union of calm abiding and meditative stabilization on emptiness, on the absence, then you've attained the beginning of the path of preparation. And over the path of preparation, there are 4 stages in which the sense of duality disappears. There's a beautiful layout of this. So, to reduce the Gelug conceptual realization of emptiness to that very first level that His Holiness clearly talks about, yes, in terms of apprehended object being the absence, and apprehending subject, which is the thinking that inherently existent body does not exist, or inherently existent I that was so palpably appearing to my mind does not exist. Reducing the whole spectrum that leads to totally non-dualistic realization does not exist. Totally non-dualistic realization. Reducing it to that initial step is a total mistake. Now, the issue between Gelug and Nyingma is whether what Gelug says is realized at the path of seeing is what, Nyingma says is non-dualistically realized. That's where the issue is.